Hello, welcome everyone to our event this afternoon in celebration of LGBT plus History Month. Thank you so much for attending today's event. My name's Caroline Digby-Bowl and I use the pronouns she, her, and I'll be your host for today's event. The staff network here at Canterbury Christ Church University, CCCQ, are absolutely delighted to have with us again Olly Pike and colleagues Mel Lane and Jack Lynch to talk to us a little bit about their latest book, What Does LGBT Plus Mean, and share with us some of the resources, some of the curriculum resources, some of the videos that you can use alongside that book. And they produce some wonderful inclusive educational resources for parents, teachers, children and their carers. So we've got an exciting session today. In particular today, they're going to talk about their latest book, which is their first non-fiction book. We will have some time at the end of the session to have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions for Olly, Mel and Jack, either throughout this session, then please do post in the Q&A box which should be on the right hand side of your screen. And at the end of the session, we'll put those to Olly, Mel and Jack. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to Jack Lynch from Pop and Olly to introduce the company. So I'll pass over to Jack now.
Lovely, thank you very much. I'm going to just share my screen and hopefully we will then see the presentation. So, okay. So, hopefully we're all seeing a presentation now. And I'm not making this up in my head. Yeah? Perfect. Okay, so my name is Jack. I use they, them pronouns. We are Pop and Olly. Pop and Olly is an educational resource. Olly is our CEO and founder. Mel is our head of resources. And Pop is our balloon mascot, because who doesn't need a balloon mascot in their lives? Pop and Olly, like I said, is an LGBT plus educational resources for children, parents, carers and teachers. Our videos and books and resources are being used in primary schools across the UK and beyond to teach about equality and diversity, whilst ultimately helping to combat LGBT plus prejudice before it can begin to form. We're here to talk to you today, not to convince you that LGBT plus education is needed, as hopefully we're preaching to the choir here. I'm here instead to introduce you to our company and how it might help you to improve equality and diversity for the people in your lives. So warning, I'm going to head into a couple of slides of stats to understand where we're coming from, and then I promise I will come back to the fun and colourful stuff after that. So we know that the rights of LGBT plus people have been fought for a number of issues for many, many, many years. However, although these issues are important, we believe that the most important impact that we can make is through education. The rights of LGBT plus people have been an issue for decades before our generation and will continue for decades afterwards. This is to say that the most important thing is to look to the future, to the next generation, to help teach them from the youngest ages the importance of kindness and making everyone feel welcome and included. So what is the state of LGBT plus education as we stand? Well, it's not great. 48% of pupils have little to no positive messaging about being LGBT plus in schools. Of this, 74% have contemplated suicide or self-harm. Now, it's important to say here that only 40% of LGBT plus primary and secondary staff are out to their pupils, and 31% of those staff see their colleagues and school board as a barrier to including to being out to their pupils. LGBT plus young people are twice as more likely to contemplate suicide, and Black LGBT plus young people are 3 times more likely. So we're no longer simply looking at a political issue here or a social issue here. We're actually looking at an issue of public health for these children, where LGBT children are self-harming and taking their own lives because they're not seeing themselves represented and not being well enough supported by their peers and teachers. And these aren't just stats, these are children. These are your children, these are your friends' children, there are future generations. It's important to caveat this by saying that there has been some great progress in education over the recent years. Improved legislation, namely the RSE guidance, as well as some inspiring teachers and individuals working to create a more inclusive school environment. The fact that we're on events like this is just promoting that step forward that we are taking. But individuals alone are not enough to combat these stats, and these stats are still very real and very recent. So this is the light at the end of the tunnel. Children are not born prejudiced. It's a learned behaviour. It's the long-term solution. It's a legacy we leave behind as a generation of LGBT+ people and allies, to improve the education of our children, to teach them that it's not just okay to be LGBT+, but that it's something to be celebrated. It's combating prejudice before it can begin to form. So how do we harness this is the question. We can teach children about equality and diversity from the beginning. We include stories about two mummies or two daddies, use fun books and video that feature LGBT+ characters. We introduce important topics at the relevant developmental stages in a young person's education. We want to enable children to understand each other and themselves better. So I want to enable children to do that, but I want to reiterate here that I'm presenting to a room full of people and allies that are already aware of this issue and are already taking steps to tackle it. So I'm not selling to you bringing the idea of education into your schools. I'm literally saying you're already here with me. Let me show you some tools as to how to do that. We have been into schools and seen our books, videos and resources being used firsthand. We've worked with educators up and down the UK to understand what they need rather than telling them what we think they need. So this isn't just an idea we've had, it's not something we think will be great, although it is great. We know it works, it's tried, it's tested. From hundreds of free videos on YouTube, free educational videos that you can access right now, to storybooks with diverse characters, from queer fairy tales, a transgender Cinderella romance, family diversity for young readers, to classroom resources and a whole library of them, linked together to create lesson plans and whole syllabuses of inclusive work for teachers to use. Alongside our website and resources, we launched the Kenny Lives campaign in 2019 with the aim of getting a copy of our book into every single UK primary school, to make sure that every primary school child has at least one queer book in their library. And you can go to our website, popandolly.com, and you will be diverted to our other website called LGBT+ Education. So go to our website and you will find a whole list of schools, all of the primary schools in the UK, and you will be able to see which of those primary schools have a book and which of those don't, and exactly which one of our books we have. We've donated over 7,000 books so far, 7,001, the one is very important, of the 23,000 primary schools in the UK. And recently, with the release of our new book, What Does LGBT+ Mean, we're now sending 2 books for each donation. These books are being donated by our members every month, as well as members of the public just like you, wanting to improve equality education in their area. So this campaign is going really, really, really well, and we're really happy with it. But there's a long way to go. I mentioned that we have spoken to educators and parents about how they feel and what they needed to help teach better about equality and diversity. One of the major points that we had feedback on was that there's so much information out there and it's confusing. And what they need is like a beginner's guide so that they can understand the basics of things like gender or sexual identity and saying the right things. So we've developed our most recent book, What Does LGBT Plus Mean? A guide for young people and grown-ups to tackle exactly that. So I'm going to hand over to Mel and Olly, who are going to tell you more about this book, which we're hoping will revolutionise primary education. And I don't use that as a small term, I use that as a big term. This is the first book of its kind to be in primary schools. So I'm going to hand over to Mel and Olly right now, who will tell you all about this new book.
Thank you, awesome Jack. Thanks for that. Yeah, so 1 second, I will be sharing my screen shortly. Bear with.
Whilst Olly's sharing his screen, I'll tell you a little bit about how we set it up. So Olly and I actually met through social media when I was introduced to his books by my son. So I'm a long-time primary school teacher. I was in the classroom for 23 years, but I became more and more passionate about LGBT inclusion. And my son introduced me to, my son's grown up now, my son introduced me to Olly's books. And so we've done some work together when Olly had the great idea of producing this book. In Dorset, where I'm based, I go into a lot of schools and talk to a lot of teachers. And as Jack was saying, they were telling me, we want some information. And although we wrote the book pitched at 9, 10, 11-year-olds, actually the book's appeal has been far, far broader, and we have had so many adults tell us, oh my gosh, I've learned so much from that. But I'll pass back to you, Olly.
Thanks, Mel. Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Olly Pike and I'm the director of Pop and Olly, and I write the books, I draw the pictures, I animate the videos, and yeah, kind of hold Pop and Olly together. I've got the amazing Mel and amazing Jack by my side helping me with so much. So it's an honour to be working with them. And as Mel mentioned, what does LGBT plus mean? Hopefully you can see it now on your screen. It's our latest book, and it's actually Pop and Olly's first non-fiction book. Our first 5 books are fairy tales. And I think this book is a testament to how far the company's come. We've been going for about 5-6 years, and when I first started, it was very much about, oh, let's make fairy tales which have LGBT plus characters in, maybe have 2 mummies or 2 daddies, maybe there's some queer princes, let's have a transgender Cinderella story. And it's slowly been building and building, and we've got to a point where we've kind of done the stories now, we've done the fairy tales, we've introduced the characters. We've been into schools and we've spoken to the kids and let them know about diversity, but it's kind of got to a point where the kids now want to know more, and we want to make sure that they're being told the correct information and that it's not necessarily words that they hear on the playground incorrectly, because things like that can get out of control. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we decided to write the book. Of course, the other reason is because I didn't have anything like this when I was a kid, and it would have helped immensely, not just me, but generations of people if we'd have had this information at primary age level. So what myself and Mel are going to do is just take you through the book, because rather than talking about it, we thought we'd just show it to you, because I mean, look at the cover. I think it speaks for itself about what it's about and what the tone of it is. It's super friendly, it's super easy to read, and the kids are loving it. And even though it's our names on the cover, my name, Mel's, and Mel's son James, we actually spoke with so many people with regards to this book, so many teachers, so many people of different identity, people of colour, of different abilities and disabilities, just to make sure we could fully represent the spectrum of the human race, basically.
And we wanted to make sure as well that we spoke to a lot of children. So we've trialled the book in schools with an awful lot of young people. So we worked with their teachers, they looked at it, and we adapted the book to make sure that kids love it. So we love getting pictures. Lots of send us pictures of kids reading their book and getting absorbed in it. There's a beautiful picture that Olly's got of a little girl just sat on the stairs. She didn't even make it upstairs to her room. As soon as she opened the book, she had to start reading it.
I love that one. So yeah, it's funny because this is kind of a bit of a lockdown project, and I think it was like day 2 or 3 of lockdown. I was like bored out of my head, and I had already written the first draft of the book, like what does LGBT plus mean, and I remember sending it to Mel and being like, what do you think? And Mel and her son James were like, yeah, we like the idea, but we have a few thoughts. And thank goodness they did, because it's become about 1,000 times better than what it ever would have been. And now the main running through line of the book is actually identity. And we start with a hello and introduce who I am, the channel, look out for some flags. But the first chapter is actually identity. And this is such a great place to start, because in this chapter, we liken identity to a cake, and how we're all like cakes, and we're all made up of different ingredients, and one ingredient isn't the whole of ourselves, if that makes sense. Like, there's so many different things that make us up, and kids really love this idea, and it really kind of resonates with them. So a lot of this book is about taking, you know, some complex topics and making it really understandable at a primary age level.
One of the things that we really wanted to do as well is make sure that there was a lot of discussion. So on several of the pages we've included talk to a friend, ask some questions, think about things, and the young people, the kids told us they really like the interactivity of the book, and adults really like that way that it was engaging and encouraging children not just to read it or have it read to them, but to actually talk about it as well, and to sort of think about how that impacts on them and the people that they know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And as well as that, a lot of the pages come with exercises as well. And at the back of the book, there's some worksheets which children can fill in. You can even grab a copy of this for free from our website to fill in. And there's an animated video of this chapter on our YouTube channel, which has already had about 100,000 views. So it's super popular. Moving on to the next chapter. This was probably the hardest chapter for us to write, because there's so many different ideas around gender, and we wanted to be able to include all of them. So this kind of gender section started as like 2 pages long, and it's actually turned into like about 4 or 6 pages, because we wanted to explore, obviously, assigned sex, gender, but then, you know, there's also the concept as gender as a spectrum. We obviously need to include the topic of transgender and non-binary, which we also have pages for. We wanted to talk about intersex as well, or differences in sex development, and of course gender stereotypes. So this kind of section is super long, but we've kind of broken it down into to little chunks as well, and we're also doing that with the videos. But I think the key thing with this section, the key word that we discovered, is the word some. Some people feel like this, some people don't. Some people feel like this. And I think that's such a great word when you're talking to children, because it's like it just reinforces the concept that everyone is different. We're all so unique. Mel often says this really amazing thing, that nothing about humans is binary. There aren't 2 hair colours, there aren't 2 eye colours, there aren't 2 skin colours. Like, of course, there's not going to be 2 genders. Like, that's just not possible. I think that's a really lovely way of thinking about gender.
And I think what we've really seen is that actually younger people don't struggle with this. It's the older the person is, the harder it is for them to engage, because the older we are, the more likely we are to have just heard and lived in a very binary view of gender. But for young people, we find that actually they're very open to this idea, and seeing gender as not very fixed. So these conversations are already taking place, but this is a really nice visual and a way of introducing things to people in a way that's like, this is really reliable factual information that you can explore for yourself.
Yeah. And again, this page you're seeing right now is available as a video for free on our YouTube channel. Mel and myself have developed some worksheets to go alongside this page as well. And something else we really love about this chapter, and we thought was really important. We already mentioned that we got other people to help us write this book, because there's no way we could have spoke about all of these topics by ourselves without our one experience of them. So we needed to get trans and non-binary people involved, and we've actually got like little, what do we call these, editorials, testimonials, no, editorials of real people who have just provided us with like 1 or 2 lines of their experience, just so any children reading this book can read it and be like, oh, like this person, Eli, actually exists and they're trans. So that's a really cool part of the book, which you'll notice as we go along. Again, we had an intersex activist, Anik, who you might have heard of, who's awesome, who really helped with this intersex section. Yeah, so that's kind of the gender section. Anything you want to add to this, Mel?
No, I think you've done a great job. I think one of the things that we really think, the gender stereotyping, it was really important to us to introduce a conversation, because I know from my experience working with young children for many years, is that often that idea that there's just one way to be a boy, one way to be a girl, and those very sort of like clearly defined roles is one of the reasons why people struggle with somebody that doesn't fit into that. And so what we're trying to do with our work and the way and everything that we're offering to children is to say, whoever you are, however you identify, in whatever way, that's right for you. There aren't strict rules about who you are and who you should be just because of how you're defined, that we can define that for ourselves. And gender stereotyping and getting kids to think about that and thinking, actually, am I being encouraged to take on this role just because I've been labelled as a boy? It's freeing for children. It's about saying whoever you are is right for you.
Yeah. And actually, that's kind of one of the main things that Pop and Olly is about. It's about just giving children the options to think for themselves. We're put in boxes so quickly as human beings, and it almost makes our world smaller depending on what box we're in. And I think, you know, by breaking gender stereotypes, you actually, you know, make the world bigger and give children more options. So I think gender stereotypes is actually really crucial at primary age, and perhaps even younger than what this book is necessarily pitched at. You need to start breaking stereotypes. You need to start breaking gender stereotypes as soon as you can with young children. We then wanted to obviously branch into romantic love as well. I think because we started, you know, just talking about sexuality and sexual orientation, and it's like, well, actually, romantic love and sexual orientation are actually, you know, 2 different things. So we wanted to draw attention to that, and of course include people who are aromantic. It's actually Aromantic Awareness Week this week, if you didn't know. So it's super important to let children know that, again, some people will fall in love, some people won't, and there's no really right or wrong way to do that. Moving on to the next chapter, again, this is available as a video. We've also got like a little cutout worksheet, like mix and matched game, which is at the back of the book, or you can download a version from the website. And we haven't included every sexual orientation, but the thing with this book is like the first stepping stone for children that have maybe heard of the word LGBT+, but don't necessarily understand it fully yet. So we didn't want to bombard the children and the teachers with countless terminology. As much as it's awesome that we have all these words, it's like, this is the first step. If you can kind of grasp this, then it's going to give you a really, really good foundation for growing up and for understanding what LGBT+ means. Yeah, and then we branch off into other topics as well. And actually, this chapter and this video have gone down so well, and I think it's because of the way we're explaining it. We wanted to talk about privilege, and basically this little chapter says, you know, what if there was a world of shapes and the triangles were in charge, and the triangles got to choose how everything looked and how everything was made, and how everything fitted. The triangles would make everything triangle shape, and the triangles would be having an amazing time. And the triangles probably wouldn't realise that the other shapes actually find it quite difficult to fit in this world made by triangles for triangles. So that's how we are trying to explain privilege to younger children, and they seem to be getting it, which is awesome. Yeah, so check out that video if you get the chance. Again, we've got worksheets to go alongside this chapter as well. And this was an interesting page for us to create, because we wanted to include what the law actually says in the UK with regards to discrimination. Unfortunately, some of the language around that law isn't the most inclusive, and we were kind of debating, well, should we like tweak it so it sounds a bit more inclusive, or, you know, should we leave it as it is because that's what the law says? And in the end, we decided we have to put what the law says currently in this book, because it would feel irresponsible to not do that. However, we've included some questions for children to say that even though, you know, this law is seemingly pretty good, it seems like a lot of people are protected. Is everyone protected by this law, or could it be changed to make it even better? So actually, with this page, we kind of wanted to inspire kids to get thinking about our actual law and whether it is inclusive enough. You know, is the language used here inclusive enough? What do you think?
And also to be aware that the legal situation of a country has a huge impact, that in our country we do have an Equality Act that does actually provide a lot of protection for people that doesn't exist in other countries, and that makes something like homophobia or transphobia or hate crime, that children understand that actually it's not just what their parents, their adults, their teachers happen to say, that it's actually part of the ethos of the country, and that that's something that we should value and work towards improving, that it's an important part of who we are and what we say is important.
And then a little history lesson as well.
You've accidentally hit mute, Ollie.
Unmute.
Oh, mute has just come on again.
Okay.
I can hear you, Ollie.
Can you hear me now? Can people hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what happened there. I'm sorry. Just to check everyone's awake. So yeah, so this section is about the first Pride. We wanted to talk about kind of what went down, what inspired LGBT plus liberation. So yeah, tiny little history lesson. There might be some faces you recognise in there. We haven't labelled them, but there is a Marsha P. Johnson. There is Sylvia Rivera, and this is also meant to be Stormy DeLavery. We've actually just done a little video about them as well, about them three characters, and you know, because it's not certain that those three characters were actually there at the Stonewall Inn when the riots broke out. However, they were such, you know, huge figures and inspirational figures in the LGBT plus community at the time, so they definitely had a part to play with regards to LGBT plus liberation at that time. So yeah, a little history lesson. I think what happens next in the book? Oh yeah, how can I help? We basically wanted to, again, inspire the children to think for themselves and think about how they can actually, what little things or big things can they do to make the world a fairer and more equal place. So there's a few little things that the kids can do, you know, wear or display your support, write to their MP should they wish, standing up for others. That's just like a nice everyday thing that you can you know, get the kids to think about and march or peacefully protest as well. We wanted to include them.
Children often think they don't have any power. They think their world is one where they're just told what to do a lot of the time, and actually helping children to recognise that they are part of a democracy, that they have a voice, that their voice matters, and that laws change, and that because of how things change, because of what people say, I think is really important. Encouraging people to see that rights come from people fighting for them, and that you can be part of that. And if you want to support the LGBT plus people in your lives, then that's something that you can actively do.
Exactly. And then we kind of wrap the book up and basically say, we know that was a long way of answering your question, but we have definitely answered the question, what does LGBT plus mean? And you've learned so much more than you could have imagined. And then this is just a page for fun, basically. We just wanted to show that being LGBT plus, you know, there isn't one way to do it. There's countless ways, and each way is valid. And also, I just wanted to draw a load of pictures because I like drawing. So that's what this page is.
In our work, it's so important that we're presenting things in a really positive light, and really making people feel good about themselves, about their families, that this is a very valid, important, that it's important that you see this is a very valid way for people to live their lives, and just be another way to be a human being. Exactly.
And then a little flag guide, which the kids seem to love, didn't they, Mel? Out of everything, they were like, love the flags. And I was like, okay, that's cool, sure. We thought it was important to add in, you know, kids might have further questions, just added a few helpline numbers in there, and remind them that they're not ever alone, no matter how they feel. Again, some of the worksheets that they can cut out or use, or you can download them from our website. And then information about the company, which I don't need to go into. And I've had, well, we both had such amazing, how do I stop sharing my screen? There we go. We both had such amazing feedback from teachers and pupils. And actually, one of the most amazing things that someone recently told me is that a teacher said a little girl in her class came up to her by herself and was a bit teary and was like, oh, I think I might be LGBT plus. And the teacher had this book and she gave it to her, and the little girl, I think was a little Muslim girl, where she was wearing a hijab, and she turned it over and she saw this little picture on the back, and the little girl, the teacher said, oh my gosh, that girl looks like me. So the fact that we're able to reach children like that and just show them that it's okay to be LGBT plus, no matter who you are, no matter what your religion is, no matter what your ability or disability is, a big reason why we're doing this. So that's a little heartwarming story for all of you. And yeah, I think we're pretty much finished, unless Mel, you want to add anything?
No, that's great. I think you had some questions for us, Caroline.
I do indeed. Yeah, so as you can see on the screen, if you have any further questions for Olly, Mel or Jack, please do pop them in the Q&A panel on the right of your screen. But we do have some already, so I'll ask those to the panel. So the first one comes from Noah Arthur, who I suspiciously think may be my son. I told you to be prepared for this one, Olly. When will there be a dinosaur in your books, and can he be called Rex?
They can be called Rex, and it's a creative process. You see, you can't rush it, but it's gonna happen. I'm waiting for like Jurassic Park to come out, so it's topical.
Yeah, good. He'll love to hear that. He is watching downstairs, so he'll love to hear that. I'll feed that back. And apparently he's writing you a letter right now.
Oh,
There we go. We've had another question. Will we be able to get a copy of this presentation to get all the links and the stats, etc., to share with staff? So this event is being recorded. So when the live event finishes, there will be a recording, and you'll be able to access that recording for 7 days' time via your event link. So via the link you were sent with your ticket. If it's okay with Ollie and the team, we'll do what we did last year and get it onto our private YouTube channel as well, so it'll last a little bit longer than 7 days, again for those that have signed up to the event. So you'll be able to share this recording with your colleagues, and particularly if you're working in school, that would be fabulous.
So I don't even know if we mentioned it, but if you want copies of the book or any of our books, just go to popandolly.com, because you can get the books from there. You can also get links to the videos. We have a membership area, so head to that website for all of it, access to all of our resources.
Also important to say here that if you are not in a position where you want to buy a book necessarily, what you can do is donate a book to a school. You can either select a school that you want to donate one to, or you can simply send in a donation and we will find a school to donate for you. So you can also get that through our website as well.
Exactly. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you. And I've got a couple of slides at the end, which I'll pop up the address of the website as well, so people can have a look at that. Another question that we've got is, what age range would you say this book is aimed at?
This book is for everyone, but we wrote it with upper key stage 2 in mind, so that is like 9, 10, 11-year-olds. However, all kids are different. All kids have different reading abilities, and all kids are going to be in different places and ready to learn about this at different ages. So I think that's what's so amazing about this book, is actually pretty much any kid could, even just looking at the pictures, you're like, oh, 2 men holding hands, 2 women holding hands. It works on many levels, but yeah, the language, I would say 9 to 11-year-olds is who we've aimed it at. But we've had grandparents and mums and dads and all sorts of people reading it and learning stuff from it.
And I think that's an important point. And I think we've put "and grown-ups" in brackets.
We did,
on the cover of that book.
And grown-up.
But we take that quite seriously, because I think it is, having that feedback from the educators that is saying, well, actually, I don't really understand. Like, I feel like I need a basic understanding. If that identifies with you, then I think this is a perfect book for you to pick up, and maybe this can be a great starting point for you or someone that you know. So all ages, really.
And we've also had feedback as well from teachers of kids in special educational needs schools, saying that the style of it is very easy, it's very accessible. We really wanted to make it in clear sentences that people could really understand. And Ollie's recently made a foray into TikTok and started posting our videos out there, and they've proved incredibly popular amongst teenagers. So although we thought this was just for young kids, I think it's just that very bright, vibrant, exciting visual style that Ollie has just appeals to all ages.
And one of our videos has already got like 17,000 views, and I only posted it like the other day. So we're going viral on TikTok if anyone wants to follow us. Yeah, and it is true actually, because that's maybe a group of people that we haven't really reached out to before. We focused on like the younger children, and we focused on the parents and the teachers. And actually going on TikTok, it's a load of like teenagers who also need to know the language for this, because they do feel, gender non-conforming, or they feel like they're something, but they don't necessarily have the words to explain it. So it's actually been really cool seeing their reactions and getting their amazing feedback and saying things like, I'm going to send this to my mum and dad, etc. So that's been really cool.
That's amazing. I think on TikTok you need to have a dance, don't you, Ollie? So maybe you need a Pop and Ollie dance now to go with the book.
I can dance.
I know you're multi-talented.
About 10 years old, isn't it? So I have to think of one.
We've got a couple of other questions. How would you advise that we deal with potential pushback from parents when introducing LGBT+ in the classroom?
Can I just step in and say we actually use in a slide that I use in my training, that was some YouGov polling that was taken in 2021 that showed that actually the vast majority of adults are very supportive, asking people if they would be supportive of a child, sibling or close family member coming out as LGBT. 80 something percent of people were supportive of somebody of a relative coming out as LGBT, and higher in the high 70s for transgender. And I think that actually parents are largely very supportive. In my experience in schools, they are largely very supportive. When we wrote the book, we talked about that, and we were actually saying we're writing this book for people that want to find out more. The book isn't to convince people, the book is actually to be a resource for people to find out more. What I find is that parents who are, the small number of parents that are struggling with it are often struggling with, they're afraid, they're worried that actually particularly a child being LGBT plus might make it harder for their child in life, and they want to prevent that, they want to stop that from happening. We all know that that it isn't the case, that actually you can learn to be LGBT plus, it's just who people are. So we recognize that the important thing is actually helping children feel good about themselves. Our job is working with children and teachers and being supportive. And I think that ultimately what we want to do is to show people the positive side of things, rather than our aim is not the arguing with the parents, the small number of parents that don't agree. Jack and Olly, yeah. Did you want to add?
I think it's important to say here that we have come off a long period of time under Section 28 when we were not allowed to discuss LGBT plus issues in schools. And so this book is less about pushing a, in quotes, agenda into schools. It's more about the fact that kids are seeing LGBT people in the world more and more. Their representation is improving, and it's really important that we have in schools representation of everybody in those schools. We often go into classrooms where they say, I've got two mummies, I've got two daddies. And so it's important that they see those people in the materials that are available to them. So it's about including them in representation rather than pushing any sort of quote unquote agenda into schools.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of it is lesbian people exist, gay people exist, trans people exist. Whatever your viewpoint is, you cannot argue that LGBT plus people don't exist. And these children are going to grow up into a society where there's all these different types of people, and whatever their viewpoints are, they need to know to respect everyone regardless of their sexual orientation or gender. So that's that. I'm afraid it is what it is. They need to know about it. It's absolutely fundamental and ultimately life-saving as well.
Absolutely. We've got a couple more questions and a couple of nice comments in the Q&A. So there's two more questions I think I can see. So one is, what are your thoughts on 5 top tips for making the classroom LGBT friendly?
5 top tips. Maybe we should do one each. I'll pick an easy one. So I would say representation, have rainbow stickers, make sure you have queer books in the library, not just queer role models but role models of all different types of people, of different skin colors, of different abilities, different athletes. Like, it's so important just to diversify like the visual elements of your school. So that's what I would say. I would say make it look pretty with lots of diversity.
I think it was about 3 points that you had there, Olly. Sorry. So no, don't apologise. I'm just like, I think there's a lot that we can do. I think one of the other things that I started to introduce with my children as well, this is with a year 6 class, but it was appropriate for any age, is just to drop in that representation. That it isn't just that we have one diversity week or Pride month, that actually we drop in that diversity all throughout the year. So So, for example, when you're giving an example in maths, you talk about somebody going to the cinema with their two moms, or you're making a cake with their two dads, and that you use these examples, just drop them in there, so that it's totally part of representing. As Jack says, for a long time we couldn't talk about anything, we silenced ourselves, but now we could just drop it in there, and it doesn't need to be. That's the most effective way of actually making things totally neutralized.
I think my biggest top tip, but I think there's a really, really great top tip. So I think my biggest thing that I've always practiced myself, and I always say to other people, is that it is about making it a safe space for not just the LGBT people in your classroom, but for any questions, any thoughts, and any learning about LGBT plus things. That means if there is gay being used as a pejorative in your school, and you hear it being used in your classroom, or you hear somebody being insulted, it's important we identify that behavior, and we don't punish that behavior in that moment and therefore leave it. It's important that we allow that child, or we allow this group of children, to use that as a learning experience, and to talk to them as to why that's not okay and why that's hurtful to some people. And it's about trying to create the space where children can ask any questions, children can say anything. There is no wrong questions, there's no silly things to say, and they will be included in a discussion, and they will be respected in that discussion. And like we said earlier, children have a voice, children have an opinion, and that is absolutely valid, and we shouldn't be quashing that as adults. And that goes with anything LGBT plus friendly in classrooms. So I think, rounding up those points, I guess it's about making it visually representative. It's about doing this all year long, and it's about making sure that you have a safe space for your children in your classrooms to ask and talk about LGBT plus issues.
That's great, thank you. I've got one, I think, final question on here, which is to do with the kind of acronyms that we use. So, so somebody's asking about, would they be at risk of offending others if they used LGBT plus instead of LGBTQIA, or other acronyms that include more identities?
No.
I was waiting for you to leap in there, Jack. I thought that you might want to answer.
I can leap
one.
in there, that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm happy to leap in. I would say there are, I like to refer to it as an alphabet soup. I think we are a community, and I use that word very seriously, a community of people that feel like they have maybe had no place to go, or that they maybe have nobody like them. And I think it less matters what acronym you use, but more that acronym that you use is inclusive of all those communities. So we use the term LGBT plus, with the plus on the end being a nod to all of those other letters in that acronym. So I think it's about what you feel most comfortable using, but making sure that whatever that acronym is, that it's inclusive of all of these people in this community.
Yeah,
I think just to come back to what you were saying about offending somebody, I think that is often something when I'm working with adults, they often say, I'm worried about offending somebody. And I think, you know, it's tonal, isn't it? If we're trying to be offensive, we're going to come across as offensive. But small little mistakes. We work with the young person's charity, LGBT plus charity that I work with a lot of young people, young LGBT plus people, and they always say, you can tell if somebody's trying to make an effort. If they've just made a small mistake and they said, oh, sorry, didn't realise, it doesn't matter. It doesn't cause big offence. If you're trying to do the right thing, that's really good.
Yeah, I would say don't get too hung up on the acronym. We simply use LGBT plus because, again, this book is a stepping stone. It's the first step. That's normally the first acronym you learn. So we kind of stick with that one. But as the children get older, they're going to learn about the other letters, and they can slot them in and say whatever acronym feels right for them. So yeah, don't get too hung up on it. As Mel said, if you're doing the right thing, it will come across.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to read out a couple of comments we've had that I think are really, really lovely comments we've had from people who are attending today. So one's saying that I feel all classes and the library should have a copy of this book for teachers and pupils. We'll be placing a bulk order. You are doing great things. So, you know, I'd echo that. And certainly here at Canterbury Christchurch, we have got the book in our library and in our curriculum resource area, because we have a lot of teacher trainers. You know, I will share my screen, and you can see, hopefully on screen you can see there more about Pop and Olly and all their educational resources at popandolly.com. And as Olly said earlier, you can donate a copy of Kenny Lives with Erica and Martina, which we've got here, via to your local primary school. So if you are a parent or a carer and you want to donate to schools, then you can do that. And also, if I move the slide on, as Olly said, also they're donating the what does LGBT mean alongside that as well. So you get the bonus of 2 books for the price of 1 being donated to the local schools. So you know, that's fantastic. And you can also see what schools are have got the book, so you can check on the website as well to see, you know, if your local school has the book or not, and you can get it in the library for those students and for those teachers, you know, as a resource as well. And there are loads of fabulous resources on the website, so so you can have a good look there. And as part of this this talk, Olly, Mel and Jack have waived the speaker fee, and instead we're paying to donate 10 copies of the book to local primary schools. So if you are from a local school that's attending today, please do get back in touch with us and let us know where you're from. I'll also look at the attendee list and see if you've signed up with your school email, you'll get a follow-up email from us. And if you haven't already got copies of the book, we'll make sure that you get sent them. So that's great that you want to get some in your schools. And then one final comment that says we certainly need more networks or support groups for LGBT plus student teachers where they can talk about LGBT plus issues and use this to show that LGBT plus voices matter in school, and to equip them with the confidence to take on LGBT plus issues in the classroom during training and once qualified as well. So again, I think some of those curriculum resources will be really, really useful for you know, trainee teachers. And I know Mel, you do a lot of work with the sort of training the teachers as well. So I don't know whether you want to make a comment on that about some of the resources.
I think you can also go on my website, which is diversitymail.com, and there are some resources on there that you might find useful. And sign up to Pop and Olly and my mailing list and just hear about it. We're planning, for those of you who are teachers, we're working on developing training as well around the book and taking it further about how you might develop that in the classroom. So lots to look out for, more going up all the time.
That's great. That's great news. Glad to hear it. So I think that's I think we've come to the end of the questions. Again, we've got just another comment sort of saying thank you so much. They'll be ordering some books and checking out the website. What wonderful things you're doing for children and young people, their parents and us teachers. So so I think that's a nice seamless link into saying, you know, thank you so much for attending today. Thank you to Mel, Olly and Jack for putting on the session today. You know, and hopefully we'll get you back again maybe next year, maybe if you've got another book out, perhaps with a dinosaur called Rex. That will keep everyone happy in my house. But if you have enjoyed the session, as I say, go and have a look at the Pop and Olly website and at Mel's website. You know, think about donating a book to your local primary school, because as we say, if we can stop prejudice before they form, then wouldn't the world be a wonderful place? So all that remains for me is say a big thank you to Olly, Mel and Jack, and to those of you that have attended today. Thank you so much for attending. And you can find out more about our LGBT History Months. And as I think Mel said earlier, you know, we have events in this month but beyond as well at Canterbury Christchurch University. So happy LGBT History Month, and thank you again for attending today.
Thank you, Caroline. Thanks everybody for coming to join us. Thank you.
Follow us on TikTok.
Yes, follow on TikTok. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.